Welcome back to another episode of Treknicity, the show where we explore our Star Trek ethnicity. Does that make sense, right? It sounds like a portmanteau. Listen to me trying to make an opening out of nothing. I feel like I'm air supply or something.
You're all out of love, too.
That shows my age. This is the show where we talk about all things to do with Star Trek. We review shows. I've talked about random ideas, and I'm sure we will do that again in the future. We'll talk about movies. We'll talk about people. We'll talk about everything to do with Star Trek. I am your host, Lars.
And I'm your other host, Brandon, and we may talk about air supply again.
Oh, that's not good. In this episode, we are going to talk about Picard Season 2, Episode 7. Monsters. So, okay, let's get into this kind of, I guess, from the ground up.
Spoiler warning.
Yes. Thank you. I always forget to do that, and you hit the nail on the head this time. So, yes, if you have not watched this episode, please turn back, because we will be spoilering the crap out of this thing.
Although this time it has been a few days, so
yeah. If you do like Picard and you do watch it regularly, and you haven't watched it yet, I can't help you, because I was sick on our normal broadcasting day, and I quite frankly was not in the mood to phone it in. So here we are on Sunday talking about it. And just to give you a heads up, we will most likely be taking a 2-week sabbatical while I travel out of the state to go spend some time with family. And then we'll be back to rip roaring. I said, but of course I will continue to post annoying selfies and other Star Trek related items, as will Brandon, on our Instagram page. So if you haven't followed us, please, and you're on Instagram, please go over to there and look us up. We are, of course, at Treknicity. You can see all the stuff right down there. See all that? See? Look right there. And join us in our conversations, because we love it. Also, we have a Discord server for the Red Shirt Geeks. If you want to join it and join our new Treknicity voice chat channel, then just reach out to us, DM us on Instagram, and we will be happy to invite you. That being said, let's get down to the rat killing.
Let's get to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, because I'm telling you right now, if I have to hear one more Star Trek 4 reference, I'm going to be really excited. Because I'm seriously, I mean, out of any criticisms I have for this season, the Star Trek 4 references are not one of them.
Yeah.
So let's kind of pick up where where the story leaves off. At the end of the last episode, Agnes Jurati belts out some Shadows of the Night. We get some Pat Benatar action going on. Of course, the Borg Queen pulls a Doctor Who and says, "Haha, I was secretly waiting for you to do that, so now I got the good endorphins, and I'm taking control."
It's my turn.
Yeah, it's like nobody saw that coming. Nobody. That being said, yeah. So she takes off, she disappears. We'll catch up with her later in the episode. We spend a lot of this episode inside the mind of Jean-Luc Picard, because obviously getting hit with a Tesla leads you into mental fantasy land.
Yeah.
So what did you think of it? I mean, just out of curiosity, just straight off the bat, as a whole, what did you think of the episode?
At first I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be boring. It's all going to be in his mind, and it's all just going to be blah, 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 mother, father, blah, blah, blah. But actually, I thought it was actually really good, especially when we find out that was his dad.
Yeah.
So that Gaius, whatever
Baltar.
His name was in Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah. So Jamie Callis.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, sorry, James Callis. My apologies. James Callis, who played Dr. Gaius Baltar on the rebooted, reimagined Battlestar Galactica series, makes an appearance as what initially appears to be some kind of evaluator, psychologist, psychiatrist, something, therapist, you name it, whatever. And he's talking to Picard on, a starship, a starbase, someplace. And he's going over, bits of his childhood. He talks about stories and whatnot, and what happened with his mother. And we get some kind of bits and pieces from this story that he's letting go, or he's talking about, and he's kind of sharing with his therapist. The whole time, we kind of see it portrayed as, I guess, a high fantasy situation where you've got a young prince and a queen. The queen being his mother, the prince, of course, being young Jean-Luc Picard, and they're being chased by a monster, some unknown faceless monster. The one thing that they have done really, really good during this entire season so far, and I think this is something that's very personal to Sir Patrick Stewart, is that they play out the whole domestic violence situation, which he endured at home when he was a child. His mother, of course, was abused by his father. His father had served in World War II, was involved in the evacuation of Dunkirk, and then was years later diagnosed with what they called combat fatigue, which we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder. So they do a really good job, I think, of kind of playing out that bit. I think they do a really good job of that.
Although, was his mom abused? Because now they made it seem like his mom wasn't abused and she was crazy.
Correct. Yeah. So it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow for me a little bit. Not because they kind of turn the tables on it. I mean, that's fine. You can play it out however you like. You can write your characters however you like. That's great. But I think what it was is it just seemed like a kind of a trope, as in you thought it was one thing, but it's really another. Oh, you weren't looking, and we changed it on you. But that's all right. I mean, again, it's kind of a trope in my eyes. But you do make a good point. They do actually kind of turn the tables on what we've been leading up to believe so far, and they turn it around that, his mother wasn't abused, she had mental illness. I don't know. I mean, what do you think about the idea that somebody could still experience that level of mental illness so far in the future when medicine and therapies have advanced so far?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff like that. Like, some of this stuff doesn't make sense when they say it. Like, like she would have been cured by then. Like, they would have been able to fix her schizophrenia if that's what they end up saying she has, or something like that. Or, but maybe it was something of the mind that they couldn't cure. But yeah, I like this makes sense. Like, if it's a thing that this is one of the lessons that Q wants him to learn, that this entire time he thought his dad was the bad guy, and turns the tables on it, showing maybe your dad wasn't the bad guy after all. Well, seems like something that Q would want him to learn.
That's a good point. I'm still struggling with what Q's whole thing is. I mean, given the fact that we are now 7 episodes into a 10-episode season, I would think that we would be seriously at the business end of things now, because we've got 3 episodes left and you got a lot to flesh out. You got the whole, protecting the Rene Picard, who is due to go on the Europa mission, which now apparently seems to be a locked certainty, because they managed to do whatever they needed to do to get her into isolation, and it's going to happen, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, so they got that part to deal with. They got the Sung sub-story or storyline to wrap up. They've got the whole... they kind of brought back the whole thing with Rios and getting caught by immigration type of deal. And then, of course, you've got Rafi and Seven, which you still have to kind of flesh out. We have the Borg Queen and Girardi to wrap up. And then, of course, we have to figure out what's going on with. We have to figure out what's going with Q. You know, what is he? What is the whole point of this? What is he trying to do? And why would he be so obtuse about it? I mean, he's never been that obtuse. I mean, he did kind of the whole thing with like the encounter at Farpoint. The whole thing he wanted to see is whether or not humanity could see below the surface level of what was going on and actually make a determination and act appropriately, which they did, of course. But it's not like, I mean, like, why would he need to prove that again? There's got to be something else at play here.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe he doesn't even know because he's lost his powers or something's going on with him. So.
Yeah. And again, I don't want this to sound like a criticism of the series or the show. Because at the end of the day, you know, one thing I have really had to come to accept is the fact that with these TV series, the stuff that is just, you know, of our imagination, you have to be willing to accept that there are going to be things that may not 100% make sense, or you don't have, I mean, you would be like, well, if it was real life, it would be going this way. No, it doesn't have to be that way. It's TV. It's fantasy. Come on, man. Who cares? I mean, that was like a very bitter pill for me to swallow, but I did it and I feel good about it. And so that's why when we talk about these episodes, I kind of have to remember the things I've learned and reel it back a little bit. It's like, hey, come on, don't get too critical about it.
Yeah.
You're being entertained, okay, man? It's bread and circuses. They are portraying a story that they think is going to be entertaining. And if you don't like 100% of it, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it.
And I'm entertained.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, you're like, I mean, we still get there and we still watch it every week. They've accomplished what they set out to do.
And
they got us to watch
every episode. What's going to happen next?
Exactly. And you're like, when they get to that end credits, you're like, oh man, I gotta wait till next week to find out what else is going on.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they're trying to do.
Yep.
So, you know, applause to them.
Job. Yeah.
So okay, I know I've kind of gotten off the beaten path a little bit about the actual episode itself, and kind of talked more philosophically about how we look at Star Trek and whatnot. But you know, I've seen a lot of criticism this week after the episode came out. Well, I should say further criticism of like Alison Pill's character of Alice Jurati.
What were you seeing? Because she wasn't in it for very long.
Well, no, and the thing is that they're like, you know, what's this whole thing? Like, what are they gonna do with her? Like, did they just have nothing to write about? So they kind of gave her this little sub story with the Borg Queen just to give her something to do. And Agnes, sorry, I said Alice before. Agnes Jurati's character this season is actually more, I guess it's been more fleshed out. You're seeing more of the character in the fact that one of the problems that she's experienced her entire life is that which ultimately led her into things like the artificial life kind of field is that she has felt alone.
Yeah.
And you see that now. I mean, and of course the reason why, like, well, why would she let the Borg Queen do that to her? You can't say what would happen in that situation.
I don't feel like that. I don't agree at all. Like, this wasn't just something just to give her something to do. Like, this is a really good storyline. Like this makes sense for her character because she was so alone, and it's like she could identify with the Borg Queen feeling so alone since she was cut off. So it was like it made sense that they would kind of maybe merge, or she would get her attacked and Jurati would let her guard down.
Mm. I mean, well, the whole thing about how they went about it is inconsequential. They had a goal, which was to merge the personalities of these two characters to give them that ability to play off each other. But at the same time, they did it in a way that allowed both sides of the character of the both sides of the personality of one person to be portrayed by two different actresses, and that is kind of cool. I mean, like I said, she was only in this episode a couple of minutes, and like, okay.
Yeah, there was not much else. They're trying to look for her.
Right. They didn't need it right there. My only concern is
this
that
episode was about Picard and his mind.
Right. My only concern about the whole part of that storyline is that unless they're gonna bleed this over into season 3, they're running out of time, or they've run out of time. And I mean, it's not like they're gonna turn around and like, oh, wait a minute, we're already 7 episodes in. We better figure out what we're gonna do. You know, and you have to remind yourself this stuff has been already filmed. They knew where they were going when they got there.
I think they're gonna resolve it. It'll be resolved.
Do you think? Do you think that they'll wrap up the season or wrap up the story in season 2 and then roll into something different for season 3?
Yes, because we already know the next season is going to be basically TNG.
Yeah.
So
the TNG reunion without Wesley.
Yeah. So they need to wrap it up, and like I said, yeah, they still have 3 full episodes. That's still 3 40-minute episodes, or however long each episode is.
That's true. I mean, it's
a lot of time left.
They are kind of pushing towards that resolution. You can see it, you know, like with Rios and the Doctor.
Yeah, now that
you know, they're kind of doing.
To his ship.
Yeah, they're like, oh, will they? Won't they? And then he makes that. Let me show you something, and you realize he trusts them enough to beam them to La Serena, which was really cool. Yeah. That was actually pretty cool, and I thought that was a good development for the character.
Yeah.
Just indulge me for just a second, if you wouldn't mind. But the whole thing with Chris Rios' character this season, I feel like he is the dark horse. I feel like he was the one you weren't expecting to really come out of the gate at full speed, and he did. Like, I mean, I didn't know how it was going to work with them kind of making him captain of the Stargazer and all that. But they threw some wonderful lines at him. This episode is no different, where anybody who has seen Star Trek 4 will pick up the line. You know, she's like, are you from outer space? And he's like, no, I'm from Chile. I only work in outer space. Well, of course, that just mimics the line from Admiral Kirk, where Dr. Gillian Taylor, asks him, you know, let me guess, you're from outer space. He goes, no, I'm from Iowa, but I work in outer space. And then she's like, you know, of course, so you get that again, that Star Trek 4 reference. This whole season has been replete with them, which is fine.
They're going back in time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how they went back, the fact that they went back in time, how they went back in time, the things we've seen since they've been back in time, including the wonderful inclusion of Kirk Thatcher as the bus-bound punk who was in Star Trek 4, and Spock promptly nerve pinches when he refuses to turn his music down. There's all this stuff. I mean, it's like there's just you could probably spend the whole episode talking about it. So fine, we love it. Keep doing it. I'm sure there's probably going to be some more.
But yeah, I agree with Chris Rios.
He's the dark horse in this thing, man. He is really being the character that I want to see. I want to see him fleshed out some more. I want to see more of him.
Yeah, I agree. In the beginning, I wasn't digging it so much, but he's grown on me more and more each episode.
Yeah, with him coming in season 1 as the friend of Rafi's that they, used to borrow the ship to go deal with the Romulans and the Borg and the whole thing with the synthetics and so on and so forth. You're like, really? You could have left Rafi at her double wide in Vasquez Rocks and been fine with it. But no, again, they obviously took some time between seasons to really flesh out these characters. you see that Seven of Nine slash Annika and Rafi's kind of, they're tiptoeing around things. But the thing is, what's really cool about it is they're not just kind of tiptoeing around the fact like, oh, are they or aren't they? They're just completely like, they're like, we're in mission mode. We don't have time to flesh out our feelings for each other right now.
Yeah.
We got the future to save. So whatever's going to happen between us, if nothing, is going to have to wait until we figure all this stuff out.
Yeah, especially Annika. She's in mission mode.
Yeah. Oh, you could tell. Yeah. Of course, Rafi is still trying to process the death of Anor. And
which he'll be fine. This is all in Q's fantasy.
I will say one thing. I will be terribly, terribly upset if this ends up being, another Dallas situation where at the end of the episode it's all a dream. Like, I mean, I think the only way, if they did that, I think the only way I could forgive them is if they actually show Patrick Duffy.
Yeah.
It comes off the transporter or walks onto the bridge. Oh, it's just a dream. But no. But yeah, I mean,
turns out it was just it was a dream of one of Rios's AIs on his ship.
Yeah, probably. Oh my goodness. Don't even say that because it's probably going to happen. Excuse me. So this episode had some nice little nuggets. One of them was the appearance of Sir Patrick Stewart's wife as the singer in that club that Girardi goes into. That's
really?
that is her and her band. So I think Sunny Oswald is her name, or Giselle.
I was like, I bet she's famous or she's something, but I didn't know.
Yeah, I was like, she looks really familiar to me, but then it just took me a second. I was like, oh yeah, that's Sir Pat's wife. And I'm like, all right, dude, you got it, man. Like, high five. And then, of course, we follow Sir Pat Stewart on Instagram. So a video of him and his wife and their friends at home watching the episode and her part coming on.
Oh, that's funny.
So, I mean, it's as meta as it gets, but who cares? It was great value. Yeah. She's a phenomenal singer. And it was great inclusion. One thing I said, I am glossing over a lot of things, so we will get back on track to discuss a little bit more of the episode in detail. But recently in a Facebook post, somebody had said, what do you think? Like, what do you think about Star Trek Picard season 2 so far? And there was one person's like, I'm just not getting into it. It's just not really doing it for me. And I thought about it for a moment, and I had to think before I put an answer, because my instinct would be like, well, it's kind of slipping and the gears aren't really turning, and it's like, but I thought about it, and again, this is part of the whole. I love Star Trek again. I have to see the wonderful parts where they are, and not be too critical of the other stuff, unless there is really good reason to be critical about it. So my answer back to it was, you know what? So far, it seems to me like season 2 and season 3 are going to be just absolutely chocked full of fan service. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It's not like gratuitous, and it's like,
yeah,
it's just awesome.
Parts
that fit in with the story.
Yeah. On a personal note, and I know Will Wheaton will never watch this show, but if he were to show up as like Traveler Wesley, I think I would squeeze myself a little bit, just because they're like, haha, made you think he wasn't coming back, but look, here he is. We got him.
Just like
Bam!
Andrew Garfield pretending like, you guys are going to be disappointed. I'm not in it.
Yeah.
I'm not in Spider-Man.
Sorry, man. I'm just not going to be there. And then suddenly, oh, he lied. Oh, he lied.
Yeah.
He's totally there.
I have a feeling they will. I think they realize that how popular he actually really is.
So, kind of to go through the episode itself a little bit more, we have talked about the part where Picard is relaying to his therapist this story about a queen with red hair, and they talk about him, about a young prince and how the queen and the prince are doing their thing, and suddenly they get chased and attacked by a monster, and there's a lot of symbolism in what's being described, and it kind of gets fleshed out later in the episode when we do find out that the therapist is actually Jean-Luc's father, and we come to find out that, again, his mother suffered from mental illness, and that his father was not the monster that he remembered. And a lot of this comes back, and I guess the only comment about that I've heard that kind of makes sense, that is a little bit of on the negative side, is the fact that somehow Jean-Luc forgets that he has a brother named Rene. Like
that's what I was thinking. I was like, where's his brother during all this?
Yeah,
his older brother.
But again, it's sort of the whole thing where I think he's, the way I kind of justify it being okay the way it is that he's telling a very personal story. Yeah. Like his, maybe his father wasn't all that bad to Rene, or maybe this happened, like maybe this part of the story happens before Rene is actually born. I don't know.
Well, isn't Rene's older than him?
Actually, you're right. Sorry, that's right. But I was like, well, maybe he's not in the picture. Maybe he's...
That's what I was thinking. Like, the only thing I could think of is... Because Rene, in the TV show, he looks considerably older than him. So, like, maybe he's already out of the house. Maybe he's, like, at college or something.
Yeah.
During this time. And he didn't see his mom go through mental illness. Maybe. I don't know.
Right. And, I mean, again, it is easy to, I guess, to forgive these things, which you should be like, well, what happened here, or why is that going on, and what's this happening, and like whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the story. Okay, it doesn't affect the revelation that what he thought from his childhood is actually something else. And I don't know about you, but I remember things from my childhood, and I came to realize years later that the way I remembered them wasn't quite the way they happened.
Yep, I think that's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, that's the same with all of us. Like, shit that happened when we were little, the way we remember them is not actually what really happened.
Exactly. So, we kind of, like, they flesh it out a lot to, of course, explain that this whole story is him trying to retell part of his past, and then he comes to realize that, his father wasn't the monster he thought. So that kind of wraps up that bit. And he comes and actually, I sort of glossed over this a little bit. Talon, who then reveals herself to actually be Lars in 2024. And of course, you saw it coming when she put the thing on her head and it had the freaking pointed ear shape. Yeah. I'm like, that's really specific. So
I was like, that's a little too on the nose there.
Yeah, if they're not gonna reveal to us that she's actually Lars, I'm gonna be really annoyed by that. But then again, of course, they
say
did.
Her name was Loris, but they just said she's from Romulan. She's Romulan. That's all they said, right?
Right. But the thing is also,
but you assume, now. That is her in the future. And
right. And she explains that they typically watch members of their own race, but sometimes they make an exception. Yeah. And in this case, of course.
Now, why?
Right.
She probably watched him and falls in love with him when she's 200 years in the future or whenever he's born.
Exactly. It's the Gary 7 spinoff that we wished we could have had back in the 60s. Mind you, I wasn't even alive in the 60s, so it wouldn't bother me. And after trying to watch through the original series right now, which I'm kind of choking through one episode at a time, waiting for that inevitable dopamine burst when I get to see Balance of Terror.
I still need to watch the original series.
You do? I need to give you a list of the best ones to watch. There's probably 10 or so ones that you really gotta watch.
Yeah, I want to go through the whole thing. I need to do it. I've
Yeah,
tried and started and stopped. It's so hard to go through.
it is. It is, and it isn't because they're bad stories. It's
No, it's
it's
just
because the limitations
yeah,
that they were saddled with
yeah.
just
It's like
forced
trying
them.
to go, just like trying to go back and watch the old black and white Doctor Who's. It's like, oh,
Oh,
this
like,
is
oh,
brutal.
please, yeah. Oh my goodness, the William Hartnell era. Oh, dude. But of course, remember, anybody who knows Doctor Who knows that when those episodes were made, the William Hartnell series of episodes for Doctor Who were never meant to be about a regenerating, time traveler. It was actually designed to be more of a children's educational series where they would travel through time to teach stories. And then, of
Makes
course,
sense.
as William Hartnell got ill and was unable to carry on, they knew they had something, so they had to find a way to bring somebody in to play the character again. Sorry for the Doctor Who lesson there, but still, you're right. I mean, when you go back and look at this old stuff, you're not saying it's bad because it's
No.
bad. You're like, I have difficulty watching it because my sensibilities
Mm.
are from a different time. So
Yep.
I grew up with different, I guess, beliefs and
Yeah.
expectations. And
Yeah. And they were much slower back then. It took a little longer to get the stories
yeah,
out. They would fill in with stuff that didn't need to be there, and
exactly. And again, that's a lot of
it's
that
just
comes
because,
down
yeah,
to,
yeah, progress.
right. We're older now. We are of a generation where we're like, hey, man, we can, we can talk to each other by video on a computer like we're doing right now, and then we can broadcast that to the world. When back then nobody did it except the studios,
Yeah.
and so yeah. So I mean, again, you go back through, you 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 love the bits and pieces of it, the parts where they tap into your childhood a little bit, and you're like, ooh, that's cool. But then you're like, man, I gotta have more. Like, this is like you gotta give me more. Because if you want me to stay watching, I gotta have more. We'll see more, I think. But ultimately, you know, it's a balance. It's a very delicate balance between writing what you think is a good story that people are going to watch, and writing something that's very faithful to what came before. They had the issue with Discovery, and the reason I think if I remember correctly, the reason why they took them into the far future is because they were saddled with all this stuff that had come before them,
Yeah.
with all like the original series, TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, all this stuff that's considered what they call middle age Trek. It was like they were kept running into roadblocks because everybody's like, wait a minute, that didn't happen that way. Wait a minute, that didn't happen that way. And who are you trying to pull the wool over, man? So they were trying to attract a new group of fans, people who are more in line with watching the CBS style dramas. I mean, because you got to understand that if you watch any of Discovery's first 3 seasons, it is largely like any CBS drama you've ever watched. I mean, it was almost like NCIS Star Trek, because the formula is there, the same type of acting is there, the same kind of stories are there, the same type of personal connections are there, and so they struggled. So they had to make a change to give them room to breathe. So they took them so far into the future, nobody could say, "Well, that didn't happen that way."
Yeah.
Um,
Now we can decide what happens.
exactly, and people are like, "Well," and they're like, "If you don't like it, don't watch it, whatever," and off they go. Um, so when we roll back to the story at hand, we've seen Agnes controlled by the Borg Queen. We saw them find out what happened to La Serena because Rafi and 7 of 9 come back. They realize that the ship's data has been encrypted. 7, of course, recognizes that it's Borg code that did it. So they're trying to figure out how it happened. They figure out that something happened to Agnes. She did it. And now what are they going to do? Of course, they had to have some way to get around it. So they used 7 of 9's ability or her knowledge of Borg technology to be able to undo it and get things rolling again. Which, again, fine. Kind of a throwaway thing. Have at it. We see... I don't think... And I don't know if we really saw much of the whole Sung thing this time.
No, we didn't see him at all.
No, so... again, I don't know how they're going to wrap that up or how they're going to kind of package that going forward. But again, they got 3 episodes to figure it out.
Yep.
So it's more Q and all that. So, yeah.
And then Guinan again.
Yes. So they kind of end up the episode with Picard going back to talk to Guinan. Because he needs to talk to Q. He figures that with the history that the LRNs have with the Q, she could summon him. She tells him, "See this right here?" She pulls out a bottle of drink and says, "This represents, a treaty or an understanding between our people and the Q." And so she pours a glass, and apparently when she drinks it, she's supposed to be able to summon a Q, which doesn't happen. In fact, this guy kind of walks in and he's like, "Hey, I just want a drink. I'm celebrating." I'm like, "Hey, man, we're closed." He's like, "Come on, man. I'm just celebrating. Let me have one drink." She's like, "Fine." So she gives him a glass of, I think it was a glass of wine, right? Because he asked for a beer. No, he took it back. He asked for bourbon.
"I bet you want a bourbon.
Yeah.
But really, you want a glass of wine."
Yeah. And he's like, "You're so right." So drinking the wine, he's talking to them, and suddenly he lets it slip that he's got his little pad there, and he shows Picard appearing in a transporter beam in LA. So however the hell this came about, he reveals that he's with the FBI. They storm the bar.
This is a raid.
Yeah, Guinan and Picard are arrested, and that's kind of where they leave it. I hope it's not just another Star Trek 4 play, with the whole thing where Chekhov got captured, and ultimately, he gets captured, has an accident, they save him and recover him and all that stuff. I hope that they don't play that part just because they're like, "Hey, it's another Star Trek reference that we can put in there and be kind of cool."
Yeah, they can't. I don't think they would because he's already been injured and hurt.
Yeah, but again, I mean, they're chopping it up. So at the end of the day, I guess we'll see what happens. So we'll wrap this up here. We typically would try to keep this to about 30 minutes or so, but I kind of got deep and philosophical on my views on Star Trek this episode. So thank you to anybody who is actually still watching. And I promise that next episode, which will be probably in a couple of weeks, will be a little less philosophical and more kind of popcorny. Final thoughts. What do you think is going to happen to our heroes?
That's a darn good question. It's hard to say right now. Obviously, they're going to save the day. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Star Trek.
Yeah.
The only thing that's up in the air to me is the Borg Queen. Is Jurati going to turn into a new Borg Queen? Like, what's going to happen to her? Is Rios going to stay in this time period? Is he going to be like, "I actually like it here. I'm going to hang back"?
It's actually you make a good point on that.
Unknowns.
You make a really good point about Rios, because remember he makes the point when he's talking about the cigars
Mhm.
And he's like, it's these are the real thing, you know. The
Yeah, yeah,
replicators
like
can
the
never
real
get it
food.
right.
The real food, everything's real here. Like I have a feeling that they're gearing up towards him wanting to like he's gonna be the new father for this kid and he's gonna marry her.
I hope, I kind of in a way I hope not,
Mhm.
because there's been some talk that fans are going to start, I guess, um, petitioning uh, Paramount to have a Captain Rios series.
Oh really?
And we know that it works because on May 5th we get Strange New Worlds with Captain Pike.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it's kind of like, all right, we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
I guess, like and you do make a good point. It wouldn't be Star Trek if the heroes didn't save the day. It may
Mhm.
not be. I mean, with this newer, darker chapter of Star Trek that they've been visiting with Discovery and Picard, um, it may not be all sunshine and puppy dogs and rainbows,
Mhm.
but I think everything's going to turn out all right for everybody. I think we'll see Rafi and Annika kind of finally figure out what the heck they're doing.
Like
And
what, you think they're gonna be in a relationship? Is that what you
I
think
think
they're
so, because I
working
mean,
towards?
like I think that they will figure out that they're better off together than apart.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I think that I'm hoping that Rios goes back. I do see that there's a possibility you may be right about them uh, giving like having him stay and somehow take this this role with the doctor and her son
Mhm.
and whatnot. Um, she by no means needs a father for her son. You know,
Mhm.
she is, she's a good parent, but at the same time, I think it might be a family that Rios had wanted all along. So that could
Yeah.
happen. As
Yeah.
far as Agnes and the Borg Queen, I think if she does continue to be assimilated further and further, um, I hope that it is that the Borg Queen realizes that assimilating Earth is a bad idea. Perhaps Agnes's morality will influence the Queen a bit, to the point where maybe if they do end up being one being together, perhaps it would be an opportunity for the Borg to grow as a species, not just as a society. There may be
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
evolution that we can
Yeah.
see with that. Um, and yeah, and of course, you know, we want to see Elnor come back because, dude is kind of a cool character now. Kind of sucks that he hasn't been in all season except to get, turned into a whistle in the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
So, that being said, I'm sure we'll figure everything out in the next 3 episodes.
Mhm.
Um, Thank you, everybody, for watching the show and supporting us on Instagram. We are now officially, I believe, at 209 followers, which
Dang.
is a
Nice.
which is almost a 10. Actually, it's a 12 follower increase in just the last, say, 24 to 36 hours. So again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
totally. That's awesome.
that is all the time we have for this episode. We will see you next time here on Treknicity. I am Lars,
And I'm Brandon.
and as always, rock out, witchy Spock out. All right, see you later, folks.